4 new community cases and 2 local clusters. Are Singaporeans letting their guard down in the fight against Covid-19? $17 billion in investments and more than 19,000 jobs. Singapore exceeds targets despite a challenging year in 2020. And Chinese billionaire Jack Ma has resurfaced after months out of public view. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. We begin with the latest on the COVID-19 situation here. 40 new cases were confirmed today. They included 4 in the community and none from workers' dormitories. The remaining 36 cases were imported and placed on stay-home notice when they arrived in Singapore. Now more details will be shared tonight. In its daily update last night, the Health Ministry said the number of cases in the community has increased to 14 in the past week from 6 the week before. Meanwhile, the number of unlinked cases has also gone up to 5 in the past week from 4 in the week before. A second local cluster has also been discovered. Now let's bring in infectious diseases physician Dr. Ling Lee Min to discuss these developments. She's from the Rofi Clinic at Gleneagles Hospital. Dr. Ling, we're seeing an uptick in community cases and local clusters forming. And it's emerged that several patients in the clusters did not see a doctor despite experiencing acute respiratory symptoms. Is this a case of people letting their guard down or being complacent?
Yes, I think definitely this is possible. I have to say though, I think one of the patients had only complaint of dry throat. So when it's dry throat, it can be difficult sometimes to see a doctor for that. But really, I would still want to emphasize that you don't have to wait to be unwell or have fever to see a doctor. Given this current COVID era, we really should have antennas up, meaning that if there is that slight bit of runny nose or cough or myalgias or loss of sense of taste or smell, firstly, stay at home. If symptoms persist, secondly, please go and see a doctor.
Right. Now we've come a long way in keeping our local infection numbers low. So is the current situation a cause for concern for Singapore, Doctor?
Well, currently, given what we've seen in numbers since phase 3 reopening, not yet. However, we do have to remain cautious because, as you know, for the past year, we've adopted new norms. Some have been very painful, and Singapore as a whole has done really extremely well in the pandemic battle. And we need to continue on. So really, I would encourage everyone to persist, to continue on the good efforts, remember all the safe distancing measures, put on the mask, hand hygiene, stay at home if one is unwell, see a doctor if need be. Things that we have done so well in the past year, we have to keep doing it.
Looking ahead to the Chinese New Year festivities coming up next month, Doctor, what's your advice to Singaporeans who will be celebrating the holiday?
Well, Chinese New Year has always been, a timing for celebration and reunion as well. So certainly, I think this time we should be allowed to give ourselves a little bit of the chance to let our hair down. But being the COVID era, we do need to be careful. So a gentle reminder to everyone to continue those safe management measures at home. Keep an eye on the number of visitors that comes to the house or in any small group gatherings. Go slow down a little bit on the heaty foods and drinks because you never know, maybe eat too much fried food, we might get a bit of that dry throat a couple of days later. And then finally, again, if anyone feels under the weather or have a child with a bit of the sniffles, please stay at home. Do a Zoom call to the seniors if that needs to be done. And if symptoms persist, do see a doctor.
Now, Doctor, I just want to talk about something that the COVID-19 Multi-Ministry Task Force co-chair Lawrence Wong said on Monday. Now, he warned that additional measures may be necessary as community cases inch up here. What do you think could be some of the measures that would be tightened if and when the time comes?
Well, I think perhaps some of these measures may relate to better crowd management in public places, and as well as in our workplaces, perhaps segregation of certain groups of people according to their areas of work or even activities and responsibilities at work. Really, this is all to reduce intermingling in large groups of people. Another thing that we might see happen is an initiative perhaps to ways at looking at how we can look at improving compliance to existing safe management measures.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ling, for your insights. I've been speaking to infectious diseases physician, Dr. Ling Li Min from the Rofi Clinic at Gleneagles Hospital. In other local news, passengers of Singapore Airlines and SilkAir flying out of Singapore, Jakarta and Medan will now be able to book pre-departure COVID-19 tests and receive their results via a one-stop online portal. If the pilot program launching today is proven successful, the portal will be expanded to more cities in SIA and SilkAir's network over the next few months. The new portal allows passengers to choose from a list of recognized testing facilities and book appointments for the pre-departure COVID-19 PCR and serology tests up to 48 hours before their required testing window. The test results will be delivered to them within 36 hours via the same portal, and they can then present these results when checking in at the airport. Meanwhile, Singapore's aerospace sector is set to be given a leg up with a $40 million investment over the next 3 years. This is expected to result in more efficient aircraft maintenance that brings about shorter transit times for passengers post-COVID-19, as well as better detection of potential plane faults. Announced by the SIA Engineering Company today, the investment constitutes the second phase of a program to make work easier and faster for its workers, and is part of its plans to improve processes. This latest phase will center around streamlining operations that maintenance staff are used to, including uploading available data from different sources to a one-stop mobile app. DBS customers will no longer be able to use their physical tokens to access mobile and digital banking services from April 1st. This means that users will be required to use the bank's digital token, which can be set up via the DBS digital banking app, to authenticate all banking transactions. Unlike the physical token, which is a separate device, the digital token operates within the digital banking app on users' smartphones. It is otherwise identical in function. Singapore managed to attract $17.2 billion in fixed asset investments last year, despite the economy being severely disrupted by the pandemic. Now, that's the highest figure since 2008 and exceeds the Singapore Economic Development Board's annual investment target of between $8 and $10 billion. When the projects from these investments are fully implemented, they will create 19,352 new jobs over the next 5 years, with the majority in production roles. In comparison, 2019's investments were expected to add almost 33,000 jobs. Now, in 2020, the United States overtook Europe as Singapore's largest investor region, with just over half all fixed asset commitments. FAI refers to a company's incremental capital investment in facilities, equipment, and machinery. Joining me now to discuss this further is the Executive Vice President at Singapore Economic Development Board, Mr. Tan Kong Hwee. Hi, Kong Hwee, thank you for joining us. Kong Hwee, this pandemic has left global business rather volatile and uncertain. Nonetheless, EDB's investment commitments in 2020 met its medium-term goals, with FAI even exceeding the target. What were the driving forces behind these results?
Thank you for having me, first and foremost. And 2020 was indeed a challenging year for us. So we're very happy that we were able to meet, and in fact, in some cases, for FAI, we managed to exceed that target. Three factors maybe I will raise. The first is that global companies today are still looking for growth, and Asia provides that opportunity as well as prospect for these global companies. So they pick Singapore as a location to capture the growth from the region around us. The second is that our fundamentals in Singapore remain very strong, right? whether it is connectivity, and connectivity could be trade links, they could be our transport links with the region, and that remains quite strong. We have talented people, and companies generally are able to find good people in Singapore for their operations. So with these fundamentals, companies feel quite reassured when they put their investments in Singapore that they are able to ramp up their operations well. So an example would be for BASF. This is a company that decided to put its regional production hub in Singapore, targeting the agricultural markets around us. When it comes to agriculture, Singapore is not really top of mind for many companies. Yet they decided that, because of the growth markets around us, and because of the capabilities that they can find in Singapore, they decided to make their investments in Singapore to produce crop protection products here. The third factor that I would like to highlight is, in fact, our long-standing relationship with many of our companies. This is relationship that we have built over the years between Singapore, between EDB and these companies. They have come to know us quite well, and we have paid very close attention to the difficulties that they have, for example, during COVID, and we've paid attention to where they're going as a business. And I think that has seen us been in a good position to work with them for their future.
Right. Now, Kong Hwee, the review reported that more than 19,000 jobs are set to be created in the next few years, now mostly for production roles. Why is this so?
First and foremost, I think this is a testament to the fact that we're still quite attractive as a location for companies to do manufacturing. And I want to point out that, while we say that these are all roles in manufacturing and production, there are really a range of job opportunities there for Singaporeans. In the factory, we have, for example, operators, and there will certainly be people who are responsible for processes. And then there will also be engineers who are responsible for quality, for materials, for innovation. And in fact, as we push into Industry 4.0, we need more engineers who understand Industry 4.0. Then on the other end, to support the factory, you will need commercial people who are able to sell the products. You will need HR and finance executives. So while we say production, really it is a range of job opportunities that are out there for skilled Singaporeans. The second point that maybe I want to highlight to this question is, we should not be looking at the breakdown of these jobs on a year-to-year basis. In fact, some of these projects tend to be quite lumpy. So some years we get more in production, some years we get more in digital. But what is more important is the fact that these are still the growth areas for Singapore, and that we've been able to create these jobs for a wide range of Singaporeans with different skills.
We saw the pace of digitalization accelerate last year. The average person will probably relate most to relying on tech as we work from home. But what did you observe on the macro level? And did it change where EDB focused its efforts? Did the pandemic also uncover new areas for opportunities?
Yeah, in fact, indeed, last year I spent a lot of time in front of a computer screen, whether it's through Zoom and so on. So I personally feel that. But more seriously, on the macro level, I don't think our strategy has changed so much. We made this big push into innovation a few years ago. So we are still continuing to encourage companies to explore innovation. In fact, last year we started working with a lot more companies on their corporate venturing efforts as well. And then when you start looking into the industries, we take a long-term view to our industry and ecosystem development efforts. So we pay attention to these trends. Some of the things that we've seen, for example, the digitalization of industries, or the growth of tech companies. Now, these are topics that the EDB, because of our industry development efforts, we have started working on from a few years ago. And we've seen how we were able to, I suppose, reap the benefits of these companies growing in Singapore as well. So very much, I think those strategies wouldn't have changed so much. Now, having said that, there were a couple of opportunities that arose out of the pandemic. One good example is in vaccine manufacturing. So last year, we heard the announcement from Thermo Fisher, for example. They are going to be investing into a fill and finish facility in Singapore, and they will be producing vaccines from Singapore. There are also some areas that are, in fact, not related to the pandemic, agri-food and mobility. So Eat Just will be making their protein isolates in Singapore. So this is this whole trend around consumer interest in alternative proteins that we are catching on. And in the space of mobility, because of the electrification of vehicles and sustainability, we work with Hyundai to put their innovation center in Singapore, looking into electric vehicles.
Right. Kong Hwee, I want to talk more about at the company level, how has the pandemic affected how the rest of the world sees Singapore, and in turn, how has the pandemic changed the company's plans in investing here as other countries are also vying for investments to revive their economies?
Companies look at us as having very strong fundamentals. So that part, I think, continues to be quite true for us. In fact, because of how Singapore has responded to COVID-19, because of how EDB has worked very closely with many of those long-standing partners that I talked about, I think it has put us in a good position. During the pandemic, we kept our trade links open. We made sure that our factories were able to continue to operate. In fact, we were also troubleshooting with them all kinds of issues that were related to the pandemic on the ground. So I think this is an area that we had done well. And if anything, I think it has grown the trust between the companies and ourselves.
Right. Just to round up our discussion today, Kong Hwee, what is EDB's outlook for 2021? What are the main growth areas?
2021, the first half of 2021 does look a little bit challenging. I talk to many companies day in, day out. They are a little bit cautious at this point of time. And that's very understandable because a large part of the world has gone back into lockdown, as we hear from the news every day. So companies are cautious about the first half of 2021. They are a little bit more optimistic for the second half. And this is simply because there is a vaccine that's being rolled out across the world. People are hopeful that the vaccine will help start the journey back towards some normalcy. So this is, I think, the outlook that we're looking at in 2021. Now, at the EDB, I think what we want to do really is to pay a lot of close attention to our partners, listen to the difficulties that they're going through as well as their future plans. Because of the pandemic, many companies are telling us they have to look at what changes they need to make to their businesses going forward. So we want to pay close attention to that. As a country, we need to, in fact, focus on remaining quite open and welcoming to foreign investments. There is, after all, very strong competition for these investments, and it's not a given that companies will always choose Singapore. So we have to remain open and welcoming. Last but not least, I think this is why we also focus so much on partnering with companies, on training workers, and getting them, giving them relevant skills so that they can fill the job opportunities that we have created for them.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Kong Hwee, for setting aside time to speak with me. That was Mr. Tan Kong Hwee, the Executive Vice President at Singapore Economic Development Board, sharing more on EDB's Year in Review. Now, you can read more about it on straitstimes.com. It's Inauguration Day in the United States, and in a few hours' time, President Donald Trump will leave the White House to make way for Mr. Joe Biden as the nation's 46th president. Mr. Biden will take his oath in front of the Capitol just 2 weeks after a deadly siege took place there. Our U.S. Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh has more on the mood in Washington, D.C. ahead of the inauguration.
Union Station, Washington, D.C. is on any normal day packed with people. Today it is empty. Outside, in a ring around the buildings and monuments of the federal government, 25,000 armed troops have been deployed to protect one of the most contentious transitions in modern American history. Joe Biden will be sworn in as President of the United States at 12 noon Washington time on Wednesday.
To heal, we must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember, but that's how we heal. It's important to do that as a nation.
At the inauguration itself, the theme of Joe Biden's address will be healing and unity. It is a message much of the country wants to hear and will be waiting to see if he can deliver on. The 46th president inherits a country in deep crisis, almost 10 million unemployed. A significant number of Republicans do not see him as a legitimate president. The country's global leadership on dealing, for example, with the crisis of climate change has been eroded. The US faces a new peer competitor as well, China. His first order of business will be to get vaccines out. He has promised 100 million vaccinations in his first 100 days. That is possibly the single most important key to restoring confidence. And while all eyes will be on Joe Biden, we should not forget another really historic moment, the swearing in of Kamala Harris as vice president. Kamala Harris will be the first woman and first person of color to hold the second highest office in the land, putting her, as they say, within a heartbeat of the presidency itself. Completing the theme of unity in diversity, a return really to America's progressive ideals, will be 22-year-old African-American Amanda Gorman, who will follow a line of eminent poet laureates, including Robert Frost and Maya Angelou, in reciting a poem at the inauguration. We have a couple of lines for you. They stand out. While we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. For the Straits Times, I'm Nirmal Ghosh in Washington, D.C.
We'll have full coverage of Mr. Biden's inauguration on straitstimes.com. Now be sure to follow our live blog featuring news and analysis from this evening at 8:30 p.m. Singapore time. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has granted clemency to former White House aide Steve Bannon as part of more than 140 pardons and commutations in his final hours in office. But he did not pardon himself, members of his family, or lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Bannon, a key advisor in Mr. Trump's 2016 presidential run, was charged last year with swindling Trump supporters over an effort to raise private funds to build the president's wall on the US-Mexico border. Among the other notable individuals who received a pardon are rappers Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, who were both prosecuted on federal weapons offenses. Meanwhile, Taiwan has cancelled or postponed more large-scale events as local Covid-19 infections rise. After the government's decision to call off main celebrations for the Taiwan Lantern Festival, an annual celebration to mark the Chinese New Year, more cities, including Kaohsiung and Taipei, have followed suit. Until December, Taiwan had not reported any local transmissions since April, with all reported cases during that time were imported. Over in Beijing, the Chinese capital will investigate all individuals who entered the city from abroad from December 10th and shut down a subway station. This after it reported the biggest daily jump in new COVID-19 cases in more than 3 weeks. The measures come amid the country's most severe outbreak since March 2020, ahead of the Chinese New Year holiday when millions are expected to travel, raising fears of another major wave. Alibaba founder Jack Ma has resurfaced after months out of public view, and shares in the company jumped more than 8% in Hong Kong. Mr. Ma addressed scores of teachers on an online conference today as part of an annual event he hosts to recognize the achievements of rural educators. In the 50-second video, the Chinese billionaire spoke directly to the camera from a room with grey marble walls and a striped carpet. It was not clear where he was speaking from. Mr. Ma had not been seen in public since early November when Chinese regulators ordered an overhaul of his Ant Group and launched a separate antitrust probe into Alibaba. South Korea's Incheon International Airport has bagged the top spot as Asia's busiest airport, sending former number 1 Hong Kong International Airport down 2 spots to 3rd. Singapore's Changi Airport is at number 2. Incheon processed 11.96 million passengers last year, leaving it on top of the pile for the first time ever, while Changi handled 11.8 million and Hong Kong processed 8.84 million passengers. Those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.